Hello, and welcome to Raising the Bar with the MBBA. I'm Adeola Adejobi.
And I'm Jason Clark, president of the Metropolitan Black Bar Association. The MBBA is the largest association of predominantly African-American attorneys in New York. The goal of Raising the Bar with the MBBA is to identify issues affecting our communities while also trying to identify some solutions in the process as well.
Today on Raising the Bar, we are talking to two New York-based attorneys who specialize in sports and entertainment. Joining us are attorneys Jill Pilgrim and Robert Thony. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having
us. Thank you.
Right. So I'm actually really excited about this topic because I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to get into music. I want to know when I was a kid, I wanted to get into sports. Neither of them worked out, and that's probably for the better. But there are a lot of folks that from a lot of our communities who their way of maybe being able to develop a better life for themselves is through music or is through sports. What are some things that someone should know when they're just getting started?
When we're talking about creating wealth, creating something of yourself, right? Traditionally, we think of selling products, selling real estate, owning real estate, right? And oftentimes, people in our community do not have that opportunity. So instead of physical property, U.S. law allows us to have ownership of intellectual property. That's creations of the mind. And there are many different types. The three main types would be patent, trademark, and copyright law. And specific to musicians, it really depends. So when you're creating a musical work, and you're the next coming of Beyonce, and you're 13 years old, and you have a fantastic voice, and you're a great songwriter. What do? How do you make a name for yourself? How do you sell that work? Well, first of all, the song that you create has two forms of copyright protection. The song, right, the underlying song, right, and then there's the master recording of that song. Copyright, in general, is an artistic expression rendered to a tangible medium, right? So, generally, we're talking about songs, literary works, books, magazines, artistic works, sculptures, right? That would be within the realm of copyright. If this girl, Beyonce too, wants to protect that song, then she's going to want to register it with the Copyright Office. You can go to copyright.gov, and they have tons of information on how to register both the recording of the song as well as the underlying song itself. Just as an extension, let's just say Beyonce too decided that not only did she want to be a singer, but she wanted to be big on Instagram, and she wanted to be an influencer, right? Which is quite honestly a great way to exploit your celebrity or potential celebrity as a songwriter, as a recording artist. Well, Beyonce too might have a problem calling herself Beyonce too, because of something called trademark law. Trademark law is a name or a symbol, a logo, or even a sound in some instances that represent a certain service or product. In her case, it would be her brand as a performer. She can trademark a name that she decides that she wants to call herself. She can register it with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And but the issue is, she would definitely have run into problems because in the event that a name is confusingly similar to another name that is registered with the Copyright Office, or even if it is not registered with the Copyright Office, it may have there may be some common law rights within that name, and she could run into some issues. Clearly, beyond the actual Beyonce, especially if this girl started making it big, would have some words for her, or at least her lawyers would have some words for her.
You know, I imagine most people have seen Coming to America, but when you had McDonald's and then you had McDowell's, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And let's just say Beyonce too decided that, you know, she lawyered up, or she read the USPTO website and decided, you know what, Beyonce too is not the best move for me. She found out there were no confusingly similar marks, and she decided to register her trademark, and it went through, and she has a registered trademark. Now, she decides with, months later, with 500,000 followers, that she's going to develop an app. This may be the subject of patent law. Patent law protects inventions and certain designs for a limited amount of time. You can think of the tech industry has tons of patents that are protected by U.S. law, for the limited time. But it's important to understand for the community that patents are ideas and inventions, but they have to be new, useful, and non-obvious. Quite honestly, the process can be quite long, and there can be many mistakes made, and if you do it the wrong way, you could cost yourself a lot of time and a lot of money. So at the very least, I would recommend consulting with an attorney, a trademark attorney or an intellectual property attorney.
You know, now that there's more technology and a lot of people are using things like SoundCloud to put their music out, like I would wonder, like, how has this democratized the process? But then also maybe how has it probably created some sort of confusion in terms of whether you've, own what you've created?
That's a great question. I want to sort of take a step back, really, in terms of the creation process, right? You know, there's creating something and putting it out there, but there's also the matter of, quite honestly, folks stealing music and taking, samples of songs that they do not own. It's because of the technology, it's so easy to do. I happen to be a producer and musician, and I know how difficult it is not to use something that just sounds so good and that you can take and cut up and reverse and slow down, and then you have this dope song, and like, oh man, this rocks, and let's get a recording artist to record it, and then all of a sudden you have something that is amazing but is quite problematic because you don't completely own it, at least not in the eyes of copyright law. The fact of the matter is, copyright law does not recognize how, especially if we're talking about urban music, hip-hop, how hip-hop evolved. It doesn't recognize the fact that hip-hop evolved from the culture of sampling. If we were to do it all over again and different people were in power, the copyright law would look very different today. But that's not the case. We still have to recognize and respect the fact that any taking of a musical work that is, quote unquote, substantially similar in the eyes of the law is an infringement of the copyright rights of the original owner. So it's important, first and foremost, to know if you are going to take someone's work, some part of it, that you do need permission. You do need to seek out that owner, and you have to negotiate for the use of that work.
We want to take it over to the sports side for a little bit, and so I'm wondering, let's say scenario: a high school student is a star basketball player, one of my favorite sports, and now the mom is starting to get all these phone calls from agents. Can you talk about what the difference is between using an agent and attorney in this scenario, and maybe like what this family should start thinking about?
Okay, well, that's a very common scenario, and it probably started happening in junior high school that folks were trying to come around. So it would be inappropriate for an agent to be approaching a high school student. Not to say that it doesn't happen, but it's not within the bounds of the rules, and it's not within. Every state has a state high school athletic association. There are also junior high school athletic rules, And amateurism is the bedrock of college, junior high, high school sports. So amateur means you don't have an agent, you don't have an attorney, you're not earning money from your athletic talent. Nonetheless, sports, like entertainment, is one of the ways that the communities of colors often we excel and have exposure to fame and wealth early in our lives, often because of our athletic or creative talents. And if you're a parent of a young athlete who is showing some promise, you are going to be approached. And one of the first things you should know as a parent who is not an attorney is that you don't want to harm your son's or daughter's opportunity to benefit financially in the future from their talent by doing something wrong now. So you don't want to have a conversation with agents on behalf of a high school student or a college student or a junior high school student. What you may want to do is consult an attorney, a sports attorney, just to make sure that you understand all the rules and regulations that apply to that scenario, because you're doing that you're not doing it to exploit their athletic talent, you're doing it to get advice about how to protect their athletic talent. So to maintain amateurism, a junior high school or high school student cannot engage an agent to negotiate for them. But a lot of these students have premier access to better education because of their athletic talent. So for instance, there might be a parochial private school that's very dominant in sports, but also has a really good education. And we all know about athletic scholarships to colleges and universities. That saves their parents a whole bunch of money, as well as themselves, if you can get free or almost free access to higher education. So in that scenario, I would caution parents or cousins or uncles and aunts of a young person who has talent. Be very careful not to put that child in a position where they would be precluded from getting a scholarship to college because you've done something like take money or gotten money filtered through the family to go to the child that would make them ineligible.
And just a follow-up question on that, because I think a lot of the discussion around whether like college students should be paid and things like that, what can a family do when it seems like a lot of times a lot of the economic opportunity kind of hinges upon this student, doing well? Like, okay, well, one school is offering all of these things, but then the student, for example, may not be able to, their family can't afford for them to have some of the additional things for them to be able to excel in school, like have money for books and things like that.
I have experienced a lot of those situations, and I've been practicing law for 35 years, and over that time I was an athlete in the sport of track and field. I did play basketball, but not very talented in that. Almost from the minute I received my law degree and got admitted to the bar, I started getting calls from athletes and parents who had issues, and they were asking questions about what their rights were and that sort of thing. At the end of the day, what we hope is that a young person with talent has parents and elders around them who are looking out for their best interests. The fact that in the current environment, the fact that you can be offered an athletic scholarship to a university, college that has good academics and good athletic programs doesn't mean that all your costs are going to be covered. So when you're looking at all of those opportunities, and usually if you have a talented young person, they have over 10 to 20 different opportunities. The parents and the family should be assessing things like, if my child goes to university across the country, I'm not going to be able to fly out and pay for a hotel and be able to see them. The family isn't going to be able to support them. That should go into the calculation. Does it always go into the calculation? Not always, because if a young person has the opportunity to go to Notre Dame or the Ohio State and the family
or the University of Michigan,
or the University of Michigan, or whatever, Florida, whatever your favorite university is, Connecticut if you're a female basketball player, you don't you wouldn't want to turn up the opportunity to be in the best program and go to Final Four or whatever the championships are in that particular sport. So you want to, mostly the young person wants to be in an environment where their athletic talent can be developed to its highest level so that they can play at the high level. And often parents want kind of a little bit of both, a good educational experience, but all of that plays into it. So you can see why it's it's not a straightforward decision to say, okay, you've got all these opportunities at all these colleges and universities across the country. Let's just go to this one without taking into consideration what kind of additional financial costs. I know college athletes in the past who have, when they're not in season and being supported with all the travel and the food and the meals and the plans in the summertime, they are working as cleaning people. They're working in McDonald's. But on the other hand, that's sort of the same experience that most other college students might have who aren't from families of wealth. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that an athlete might need to get a side job. The issue that you mentioned in your intro to the question is, and I'm not qualified to answer that, it's a huge debate nationally right now, is when the college or university program is taking up so much of the time of the athlete and basically treating them like a professional athlete and marketing them and making a lot of money, but they're not getting the full economic value of that. That's when things, there's an imbalance that is being debated now. There are a flurry of lawsuits that we all know about, we read about in the paper, and there was a recent case that indicated that the NCAA was going to perhaps have to compensate these athletes, be forced to allow the colleges and universities to compensate these athletes more than they're being compensated now.
Let's say I am, Jill Pilgrim, who's about to become the next Beyonce, or let's say I'm Robert Thony and I'm about to be this great track star, and everybody knows it, but I don't have that community like you're saying of people looking out for you. All I have is the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I'm watching this show today, and I know this is a little simplistic, and everyone knows that you're going to make it. We're at that point. What is the first person someone should do? I mean, should they try to get an attorney? Should they try to get an agent? Is there certain things they should be doing themselves before that?
Well, I'll jump in and then hand it off to you. So if you're a musician, one of the things I would recommend is Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. That's an organization that provides free legal services to artists and to entertainment people, creative people who don't have the financial means to afford an attorney. So early in my career, I volunteered for Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. So I would do cases, handle clients for free in order to get the experience and to help young people or other people. They're not necessarily just young people, but people who didn't have the means to find an attorney. And through that organization, you can hook up with an attorney. The alternative would be to contact the Metropolitan Black Bar Association, of course, on our website, and look at the roster of attorneys who indicate their expertise in entertainment, and that would be another way. On the sports side, I would offer the same. Go to the Metropolitan Black Bar Association and look at the website. We have both Rob and I are co-chairs of the sports and entertainment section, and we can definitely, once hooked up with someone who's contacting to get information about how they can get advice, then we can definitely direct them to the correct resources. So that would be my answer. Mm-hmm. You may add to that.
Sure. Also, I think it's important to use the internet. And, of course, use it wisely. Let's just say specific to intellectual property, copyright.gov, fantastic website. or I should say, has a lot of great information. Its usability is not that great. And USPTO.gov. They handle patents and trademarks, and there's tons of information. There's actually a lot of great videos on there. There are actors and playing out scenarios. It's fantastic. So I think educating yourself as much as you can, and at the same time not relying on just that. And unfortunately, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and so come prepared. And absolutely utilize the services of the Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts of the Metropolitan Black Bar Association, and you'll find your way.
I want to add to I've had your comment about using the web for search. I've had many folks find me through the web, not just clients, but also attorneys who need help. They may be an attorney in a different field, and they need someone who specializes in sports. And it's really interesting how many times someone has said, oh, I did a web search for sports attorney, and your name popped up. Now, what I understand from that is my name wasn't the only name that popped up, right? Several names popped up, but then they started reading the information, the profiles, your background. So obviously what we have on the web, on our websites, our body of work, our experience, that's all listed. So I think it's really, really important. But you know how in the community, the way most of us find an attorney is the same way we find a real estate person is we talk to somebody. We say, hey, do you know somebody, right? Have that conversation. And the thing about that is what I would recommend to folks who are watching this show is don't stop if someone says, oh yeah, my brother's uncle's son is a lawyer. Ask, well, what kind of law does that person do?
Yes,
because if your brother's uncle's son is an estate attorney who does wills,
right,
and you need a sports attorney or a music attorney, that person is not going to be helpful to you. You need to have someone who understands the area of law that you need assistance with.
And one last thing on that, in terms of specializing, music, especially if you're becoming an established artist and you need a lot more sophisticated help. There are music attorneys who are entertainment attorneys, but there are lots of entertainment attorneys who can't do what specifically music attorneys at the higher levels can. It gets really, really complex. So don't just assume because someone is an entertainment attorney that they understand music royalties, and they can find the way, navigate their way through the Copyright Act and all that stuff, and making sure that they have the right contacts for what you're trying to do. That's also important.
Let me add, though, because I think both on the entertainment and the sports side, some folks think, oh, all I need to do is go get a manager or an agent, right? Okay, the first and most important thing, if in fact you do want to sign with a sports agent or a manager of your entertainment career, you need an attorney to negotiate that agreement, okay? A lot of folks don't do that. They assume because this person is going to be my representative that I don't have to safeguard myself against that contract. And they lose huge amounts of money and control of their future earnings because they don't have an attorney negotiate that. An attorney is representing the client as an independent, objective person. And don't be afraid. Another thing I would say, a lot of folks are afraid of the fees of attorneys. You can discuss the fee structure. Many attorneys and law firms, like myself, do sliding scales based on what your economic capabilities are. And both of us, as we've indicated before, know where we can send you if you really can't afford to pay and we don't have the ability to help you. We can refer you to pro bono services, which are free or very, very low-cost legal services. I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, that was awesome.
What are some common issues that people come in and that you just see a lot?
My practice is more general. It spans both entertainment, sports, and just general business. And I've got to say that connecting my clients immediately to focus on intellectual property issues in this day and age of the internet and the web and Instagram and Snapchat and all these things. One of the first questions I ask is, do you own your domain name? Like if you have a name, like if you have a nickname, if you're an athlete, or you have a brand that you've developed on social media associated with you, have you locked that down? And that's when I would refer you to Rob, because that's not my area of expertise. I know enough to know when to refer a client to a specialist, and clients need not to be afraid of that, because you want the best person to give you advice on that particular area of specialization. Because here's the thing, when someone hires me in an area where I've been doing this work for 35 years, it'll take me 15, 20 minutes to get it done. You hire somebody who doesn't know that area, it may take them 2 days to figure it out, and then more time to do it, and they're going to charge you for that time.
Yeah, and in terms of mistakes made and clearing your intellectual property, too often do I see folks hit the ground running with this awesome idea they have, either for a name or a piece of music or some kind of literary work, and they start selling it. They start selling themselves based on this name, and months down the road, and someone tells them, "Oh, maybe you should trademark that. Maybe you should register that with the trademark office," and then they'll come to me, and I'm like, "Dude, there's like so many conflicts with this name right now. Someone has this name. It's confusingly similar to yours, and that person has deep pockets and has a great interest in making sure that they are preserving the rights and the value of their trademark. So this might be an issue. So a lot of time and money and energy can be spent on a mark and on a business that isn't properly protected. And meanwhile, it could be completely jeopardized by being confusingly similar or otherwise infringing on the rights of another rights holder or business.
So just to be clear, can you trademark your name?
Yes, you absolutely can. You of course, it would have to be not confusingly similar to another name that's out there or registered. Also, during the process, you would have to file basically a consent saying that I, Robert Thony, consent to my name being used as a trademark in this filing. But it's relatively simple. That particular part of it is relatively simple.
I have a really good example in the sports context of what Rob is talking about. I worked for an organization where we developed a new logo. And here's a scenario where the marketing people were working on the logo. And the legal folks were kind of aware that it was happening, but we didn't know when they came to the final logo and put the stamp of approval on it. And so one day I was in the lunchroom and I heard one of the creative services people talking about how awesome the new logo looked on banners that were being created. And I said, what new logo? So found out that the organization had approved a new logo, had not told the legal department. So we called our intellectual property attorneys. It wasn't Rob, but I'm pointing in that direction because that's his expertise. And we said, we need to get this protected. And I told the creative people, stop sending out the logo, stop putting it on stuff because we don't have it protected. Lo and behold, months later, we got a watch notice from our service that showed that that very same logo was submitted for copyright for trademark protection in South Korea. And I thought, oh, that must have been our intellectual property attorney who did a universal registration. But I sent the notice to the attorney, and he said, no, that's not us. So I said, well, so you mean this person has stolen our logo and is seeking to register it? And he said, yes. And I said, well, our registration protects us, right? And he said, well, it depends. He said, it depends on when I discovered the new logo and sent it to them for registration, it depends on whether they registered it before this person in South Korea did, and whether we call the Madrid Protocol, which is where you can register, there's a treaty where you can do one registration that covers a lot of different countries. If the underlying trade trademark registration failed, then all those countries' registration would fail. And South Korea was in the protocol. So luckily, the date on which we filed ours beat this person in South Korea. But had I not seen that, and had I not registered it, that other person, that other entity in South Korea would own the logo.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our guests for being here with us.
I'm Jason Clark.
I'm Adeola Adejobi.
Thank you very much for watching Raising the Bar with the MBBA on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network.